Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Kundananji and this is episode 1 of a series on my channel I'm calling Thoughts. And just like the title suggests, it's time to wake up.
You need to wake up, Joe!
But for me to sort of get to what I'm trying to say, I need to lay a bit of groundwork, if you know what I mean. You know, when people write books, it's like you have to world build. You know, that's your word of the day, world building. You have to world build, you have to introduce characters. And I think for me to explain what I think you need to wake up from, I need to do a bit of world building. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that there are many thoughts and ideas that you have that you've never really questioned. You've simply always had them. Like, for example, we are born and then we're thrust into school. And I know, of course, there are many exceptions to these things that I'm talking about, but it's the same pattern for a lot of us. So you're born and then you go to school and then you get a higher education and then you get a job and then you have some kids and then they have kids and then they have kids and the cycle sort of goes on and on. And we never really stop long enough to be like, okay, well, who even brought up school? Why do I really need to do this? It's like, for the most part, we sort of, we just go through the motions. And I think another thing we can all agree on, and this is the same, honestly, across different religions and across different cultures and societies and races, I think we can all to a very large extent. And again, there's discrepancies, there's exceptions, but to a large extent, we can all agree on what a good person looks like. And you never really sit and question these things like, oh, why do we think kindness is a good quality as opposed to greed and envy? It's almost like common sense. It simply is. And there's a book that I had read recently by Luke Ferry. And he's a philosopher, so he tells it from a philosopher's point of view. And he anyway, you understand later why this is interesting. Now, again, I'm still world building, and this may seem like it's coming from everywhere, but I'm going somewhere. Just stay with me. Trust the process. And so he has this book called A Brief History of Thought. And he gives, of course, a history of a group of people, why they thought a certain type of way, the thoughts that sort of governed them for a time, and why they no longer thought that way, or how that thought process gave birth to a different thought process. So why a thought process failed, for instance. That's a bit of a mediocre summary on my part, but that's essentially the premise of the book. What stuck with me, which you wouldn't expect for a book such as this one, but at some point he talks about the Greeks, right? And he talks about, this is around, let's say, 600, 500 BC. So this is a long time ago. And the Greeks at this time believed in what they called a rational principle. And they called this rational principle the logos. Now, again, this is a philosopher writing this book from a philosopher's point of view. So this is not God. But they believed in a rational principle and they called this rational principle the logos. And if you're even just averagely, I would say, familiar with the Bible, you know that when John opens his gospel with "in the beginning was the word," that word that he uses comes from the Greek word logos. And so the Greeks believed in this logos. They believed that this logos essentially governed the universe, creation as they knew it. And they believed that this logos was governing the universe with a purpose, So they believed, of course, that, again, not God, but they believed that this logos is, the reason why seasons change and the sun comes up, that obviously this stuff is not just happening by itself. And they believed there was a purpose to everything. And so, the rain is falling for the sake of the crops, right? And so they really believed this. And they believed the logos was essentially governing the world in a hierarchy kind of way. Again, I know this sounds like, where is this coming from? What does this have to do with anything? Just stay with me. And so they believe that the bottom of the hierarchy are non-living beings, right? Because they can't grow, they can't feel, they can't reason. And above the rocks, you have the plants because they can grow. And above the plants, you have the animals because they can grow and feel. And then above the animals, the apex beings. You have human beings because we can grow, we can feel, and we can reason. And so they believe there's also a hierarchy even within human beings themselves. And so they believe the people who reason really well at the top of the hierarchy, and the people who can't really reason at the bottom of the hierarchy. And which is the obvious reason why slavery thrived in a society such as this one, because they literally believe some people can't even reason well enough to govern themselves. And let me just emphasize the fact that this wasn't something that the intelligence sort of came up with to oppress the weak. This was these people really believing that they were imitating the logos as they knew it. They were imitating the thing behind the universe and creation as they knew it. And so even when you see the people in this society, this is not something they really questioned. You understand? Because it's like everyone had accepted their place at this level in the hierarchy, because this is as much as I can reason. And you know how, am I talking really fast?
Why are you breathing so hard?
I'm excited.
Well, it's weird. You should get that checked out.
They really believe this, hey? And the same way that I say there are things that are so obvious to us that we never question where they came from. This fact, this hierarchy that is ordained by the Logos was so obvious to these people that they never sat and questioned it. They never sat and said, oh, why is this? Why is that? It was as obvious to them as breathing. The same way, the definition of a good person is obvious to you. Now, what happens, of course, is several years later, with the introduction of, science and the Galileos and the Isaac Newton sort of explaining the world away as if it's a mechanism and not really the workmanship of a divinity. This really brought into question these people's core belief in the Logos. Because again, they believed there was purpose behind everything. But you have science presenting these facts that they couldn't ignore. Facts about the fact that, human beings maybe were just a bunch of cells, or, just that, or, these people believing, of course, like I said, they really believed rain fell for the sake of the crops and there was a purpose to everything. But you have science talking about let me explain simple evaporation and condensation to you. And so this really rocked them, for lack of a better term. And I remember reading this and just feeling like, wait a minute. There are two things that really stood out to me and why this really stayed with me. And the first thing is the fact that this is the prime example of what a belief system looks like. That these people, what they believed about the Logos, governed the way that they saw themselves and the way that they saw other people. That is what belief is. Like true belief, true faith in something governs how you think of yourself, how you view the universe, and how you view other people. And another reason why it really stuck with me is the fact that I could relate to their feeling of disorientation and their feeling of lostness, because I really sat with myself and I thought, I've felt this before. Like this thing where your entire world, their feeling I can honestly describe as like a communal identity crisis. Because these people, what they believed, the thing that had governed how they saw themselves and other people had come into question. And so it's like now you sit down and you're like, who even am I? Like, who even are we? Because if there isn't a purpose to the universe, if there isn't a purpose to anything, then the way we're living, this hierarchy that we have formed, it sort of dissolves. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I was reading this thinking, I've had this feeling before. This feeling, I've had it before. Now let's just put a bookmark. I'm going to come back. And I think I need to speak slower. But anyway, just put a bookmark right here. I'm going to come back. We're still building. We're still going somewhere. And another thing that I need to mention is the fact that there are more people now affiliated with organized religion than ever before. Just numerically speaking, there are more Christians today than ever before. And I think it's true of, I think maybe the other major religions, but Christianity is my area of interest here. There are more Christians now than ever before. And there was a year that I did not go to church.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
In that year, I was listening to a lot of Timothy Keller. And if you know anything about Timothy Keller, if you're my friend, those who know me, know that I mention this man quite a lot, but if you've listened to enough of his sermons, there's a pattern to the way he preaches, there's a pattern to the way he speaks. And he doesn't talk for a long time. So maybe like 30 to 35 minutes. And then he'll spend like 20 minutes presenting a problem. And he'll spend maybe the last 15 to 20 minutes presenting the gospel solution, right? And so now I've been Christian my whole life. Let me just put that out there. But I was listening to this man sort of present the gospel as something that's supposed to impact my choices and decisions and the way that I see myself and the way that I see other people. And I had to admit to myself that I didn't know what he was talking about, that was a rather new concept to me. The gospel as something that, is supposed to influence me and sort of have a say in the way that I show up in the world. That was for me an awakening to the fact that just because you affirm something as true doesn't mean that this is the belief system that's actually driving your life. I mean, I believe Jesus died on the cross. I think there are unbelievers who know this. Okay. I believe he was raised on the third day. I believe in Good Friday. You understand? I've heard these things and I believe them. I affirm that they're true. But this was not the driving principle of my life, if I'm to be very, very honest. And remember, I had said before that a belief system is something that, influences the way that you actually see the world, the way that you see yourself and other people. And I had said that I really related to the Greeks' disorientation and their feeling of lostness when their understanding of the Logos was, I guess, undermined, quote unquote. But I related to this because honestly, my belief system was my intelligence. And there's something, everybody has a belief system, everybody. There's something that's driving the way you see the world, the way that you see yourself, and the way that you see other people. It may not be the belief system you think it is. Allow me to explain. So, anyway, my belief system was honestly my intelligence. And, growing up, I honestly, how do I put this? I didn't really have much going for me. I didn't really have much going for me, but one thing that I was smart. I was a smart kid. I was a pretty smart kid. And if your education system looked anything like mine, it favors memory retention. If you're someone who can remember what you study, if you're good at memorization, then you probably did really well at school. And that was the case with me. I did pretty well. I have great parents. They rewarded me for those things. But then what ended up happening is the fact that my identity became am I whispering again? But my identity became very closely tied to my report card. Like I felt I matter because I'm smart. I'm better than other people because I'm smart. I'm worthy because I'm smart. And so without me even realizing or playing an active part, my identity became very closely tied to the fact that I was a smart person. And now I went on to university. And this is where, it started to get tricky because I was getting an engineering degree in a different language. And so imagine I take you to Japan, Japan. And then I teach you Japanese for 6 to 8 months. And then I put you in a class with your fellow Japanese people, not your fellow, with Japanese people. And I say, learn. Can you imagine? Now, I did not, of course, get my degree in Japanese, but I got it in a difficult language, okay? I don't know. For some reason, I don't want to say what it was.
I'm not going to say what race, what people, doctor, and what hospital, and what media went to. We know I can't say that. It was a Jewish doctor.
And so, needless to say, I was struggling. I was struggling because for the first time in my life, my best really wasn't good enough. And so, what should have been a failure? In life, you're going to fail at things. What should have simply been, a failure, maybe a chip in my confidence, but something I should have bounced back from, became the thing that almost took me out. I was down in the gutter, not in the gutter, in the gutter, okay? I was not okay.
How are you? I'm okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Because for me, this wasn't, again, it wasn't a simple failure. It wasn't a chip in my confidence. It was a disorientation of my reality. It was a disorientation of how I viewed myself, how I viewed the world, how I viewed other people, because it was like, if I'm not smart, then who am I? What even am I? And I think for me, this is I consider it to be the great deceit of our time, because, if I'm fighting you, if I'm trying to fight you, I'm trying to beat you at something. I mean, this is war theory in a nutshell, is that I could go two ways about it. I could fight you head on the battlefield, head to head, or I could distract you long enough that while you're squabbling, maybe I could plant discontention in your camp, right? And while you're squabbling among yourselves, I win by default. And I think that's where we are at. And I think the devil's strategy at this time is like, just keep you distracted long enough that you never stop. I've said long enough quite a bit, but you never stop long enough to wonder what you were actually made for. I think we're almost like a dog, chasing its own tail. We are preoccupied with the mundane, that we never really stop long enough to ask ourselves the bigger questions. And I call this the great deceit, because there is absolutely nothing wrong with being smart. And like I said, everyone has a belief system, and mine was my intelligence. But for you, it may be something else. It may be, I don't know, your wealth, for instance. It may be maybe you're really particularly good at something. It may be your talent, for instance. It may be your view of yourself, your reputation. Maybe you're known to be a very kind, a very generous person. You're holding on to that, and you're saying, I matter, and I'm worthy, and I have value because I am this, because I have this, because I can do this. And the problem is the fact that, and I repeat, this is a great deceit, because there's nothing wrong with these things. There's absolutely nothing wrong. But when you boil down your entire existence to your smartness, to something you're able to do well, then you've essentially missed it. Because these things are not good, but they can't hold us up. Literally, like I mentioned, this was supposed to be a chip in my confidence, but it was something that I can't emphasize enough how I was not okay when this happened. I really wasn't okay.
They don't know how smart I am. They have no clue.
God bless my older sister. I would call her crying so many times. She was probably thinking, are you getting a degree or are you suffering? What's going on? What's going on? But something that should have simply been, just a nook in the journey became something so much bigger. And I think this is something we've probably heard before. I don't think this is a particularly unique messaging. I think we have heard, of course, that the things that we seek after, they can really never satisfy us, and they can't define us. They don't have the power to define us. And we have heard that it doesn't matter what we want, because once we get it, we essentially want something else. And so the cycle never really ends. And so while it's a helpful thing to hear, very helpful thing to hear, it's also sometimes not very helpful, because if you're honest, you would admit that, I hear you and what you're saying is true, but I still want this thing. Thomas Chalmers has a sermon that I think is really, really good. It's called The Explosive Power of a New Affection. I think this was like 1500s that he wrote this, or he preached it. So it's in writing mainly, but it's really good. I think it's worth the read. And in it, he essentially says that if someone loves something, if they really consider this thing of great importance, you can't just talk them out of that affection. You can't just come and say, hey, this is the reason why you shouldn't love this thing. It's not going to help you. It's not beneficial for you. It can't satisfy you. It can't do anything for you. But he essentially says the only way to dispossess the heart of an old affection is the explosive power of a new one. And so there's social conditioning, years and years and years of social conditioning that makes us believe that these things will satisfy us. And just being told that they won't is the beginning, but it's not everything. And so, for example, I had told you that I listened to all of these Timothy Keller sermons that showed me that the gospel wasn't actually the center of my life the way that I thought it was. And that was great. And that was the beginning for me, the beginning of the realization. But where everything changed was when I started to actually spend real time in the Word of God, like real time, considerable time in the Word of God. And as I beheld the wonder of the being of God, the old naturally passed away. Naturally passed away. I wasn't actively trying to redefine myself. I wasn't actively trying to give myself a new identity, but by beholding the wonder of God, the old simply made way for the new. And so I say this because I emphasize the fact that the things that you desire, there's years and years, layers and layers of social conditioning that are making you want those things. And for your mind to change, when they say read your Bible, pray every day, they know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about. If you've ever actually learned anything, or maybe let's say, if you even have a high school diploma, you know what it looks like to actually give yourself to study. You know the fact that, for example, if you ask me today, what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the process by which plants make. I can narrate that because I have been tested on that over and over and over and over and over again. Like they asked us this so many times that it kind of just stuck. And so the gospel has to be repeated over and over and over and over to the point that it just sticks. And that's not something that happens overnight. It's not. But even when you learn something, for you to even, like I mentioned, the high school diploma, you had to actually give yourself to study. If you were learning biology once a week for 40 minutes and then reading 3 sentences of biology, you would not have graduated. You wouldn't have passed it. And if you didn't pass it, that's why you didn't pass it.
Did I lie? Did I lie?
Because it takes a lot more than that for an idea to sit in your mind long enough to actually redefine how you move. It takes some time. I guess what I'm just trying to get at is the fact that it's going to require a bit of effort on our part for God to become the center of your life. It's going to take a bit more reading. But I guess that's the difficult news. But the good news is the fact that once it does take a hold of you, once the gospel becomes something that is real to you, once your identity starts to revolve around what God did for you and not what you possess, it's almost like the world is in black and white and it's suddenly in color. The difference is that stark because you're finally awake. The things that so many things stop mattering. So many. And I think that is the cause of our anxiety, that so many things matter. But God is like, hey, they do. God is not like this doesn't matter. They do matter, but there's simply something that matters more. And that which matters more starts to matter the way it should matter. Then the other matters don't matter anymore. But I think you understand what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying. So this was a bit here and there, but I think the premise is evident. No? No? Yes? No? I have a video that I did before this one, and I think I had spent the first maybe 12 minutes talking about what Bible study looks like for me. And I'll just have the video in the iCard. And I think you should give it a watch. You know, I think it's time to give God a chance. A real chance. A real chance. Giving a chance and giving a real chance are two different things. I think it's time to give God a real chance. I think I'll close off by reading a quote that I really, really like by C.S. No one gives an example like C.S. Lewis. Nobody. Nobody. And he essentially says that, watch me not find it. Watch me not find this quote. Okay. It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea, we are far too easily pleased. We really are like kids. We are playing with mud pies. And God is kind of coming like, here's an offer, you know, here's a trip to the sea, take it. And I guess this is my imploration to you this fine Thursday morning to take it. Goodbye.